Canada, A Journey Through Time, Chapter 1. The Land Before Time, Indigenous Beginnings. Long before European explorers set foot on the vast expanse of land now known as Canada, Indigenous peoples had already built thriving communities, cultures, and civilizations. From the Arctic tundra to the lush forests of the Pacific Northwest, each region was home to unique nations with distinct traditions, languages, and ways of life. Archaeological evidence suggests that the first humans arrived in North America over 12,000 years ago, likely crossing a land bridge from Asia. Over time, these early settlers developed into diverse societies, such as the Inuit of the north, the Iroquois Confederacy in the east, and the Plains nations of the west. Their societies were deeply connected to the land, relying on hunting, fishing, and agriculture for survival. Spirituality played a central role in Indigenous life, with many nations believing in a deep connection between humans, nature, and the spirit world. Oral traditions passed down stories of creation, history, and moral teachings, forming the foundation of their rich cultures. This chapter explores the deep history of Indigenous peoples, their contributions to Canada's identity, and the lasting impacts of colonialism on their communities. Understanding their legacy is crucial to appreciating the full scope of Canada's history. Chapter 2. The Arrival of the Norse, Vinland, and Early Explorations. The first known Europeans to set foot in what is now Canada were the Norse, led by Leif Erikson around the year 1000 AD. They established a short-lived settlement in what is believed to be Lonsall Meadows, Newfoundland, calling the land Vinland. The Norse sagas describe encounters between the Norsemen and the indigenous peoples they called Skrallings. These interactions were often tense, leading to conflicts that ultimately contributed to the Norse abandoning their settlement after only a few years. Despite their brief presence, the Norse left behind evidence of their exploration, including remnants of dwellings and tools. Their journeys marked the first recorded European contact with North America, centuries before Christopher Columbus's voyages. The Norse presence in Canada is a fascinating but often overlooked chapter in the nation's history. While their settlements did not last, they paved the way for future explorations and laid the foundation for the eventual European colonization of the Americas. Chapter 3. European Encounters, the Age of Exploration. The Age of Exploration, spanning the 15th to 17th centuries, saw European powers set their sights on the vast and uncharted territories of the Americas. Driven by a desire for wealth, trade routes, and new lands, explorers from Spain, Portugal, France, and England embarked on perilous journeys across the Atlantic. In 1497, John Cabot, an Italian navigator sailing under the English flag, became the first known European to reach the shores of North America since the Norse. Landing somewhere along the coast of present-day Newfoundland or Labrador, his voyage laid the groundwork for England's future claims to Canada. By the early 16th century, French explorers such as Jacques Cartier ventured into the region. Cartier's expeditions along the St. Lawrence River in the 1530s set the stage for France's deep involvement in the land that would later become Canada. He claimed the territory for France and engaged in early interactions with the indigenous peoples, forging fragile relationships that would shape the colonial era. European exploration fundamentally altered the indigenous way of life. The arrival of traders, missionaries, and settlers brought new technologies and goods, but also devastating diseases and cultural disruptions. The Age of Exploration was a turning point in Canada's history, marking the beginning of European influence and the struggles that would define the centuries to come. Chapter 4. The French Claim, New France and the Fur Trade. By the early 17th century, France had solidified its presence in North America, establishing a colony known as New France. Samuel de Champlain, often called the father of New France, founded Quebec in 1608, laying the foundation for French influence in Canada. The fur trade became the economic backbone of New France, with French traders forging alliances with indigenous groups such as the Huron-Wendat. These partnerships were mutually beneficial, as the indigenous peoples provided valuable furs in exchange for European goods. However, these relationships also led to conflicts with rival indigenous nations and European competitors, particularly the British. Despite its growth, New France remained sparsely populated and dependent on France for support. The colony faced constant threats from both indigenous resistance and British expansion, setting the stage for future conflicts that would determine the fate of Canada. Chapter 5. Conflict and Conquest, the Struggle for North America. Throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, France and Britain vied for dominance in North America. A series of wars, including King William's War, Queen Anne's War, and King George's War, saw the two colonial powers clash over territory and influence. The final and most decisive conflict was the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, which culminated in the British conquest of New France. The pivotal Battle of the Plains of Abraham in 1759 saw British forces under General James Wolfe defeat the French under Marquis de Montcalm. With the Treaty of Paris in 1763, France ceded its Canadian territories to Britain, marking a major turning point in Canada's history. The British victory brought significant changes, including new governance structures and tensions between the British authorities and the French-speaking population. The struggle for North America had reshaped the future of Canada, setting the stage for new political and cultural dynamics under British rule. Chapter 6. British Rule, the Aftermath of the 7 Years' War. With the British victory in the 7 Years' War, Canada underwent significant political and social transformations. The Treaty of Paris, 1763, officially transferred New France to British control, bringing new governance under the British Crown. The French-speaking population now had to adapt to British rule, while Indigenous nations faced increasing pressures from expanding colonial settlements. To ease tensions, the British issued the Royal Proclamation of 1763, which recognized Indigenous land rights and attempted to establish peaceful relations. However, conflicts persisted as settlers encroached on Indigenous territories. The Quebec Act of 1774 granted religious freedom to Catholics and preserved French civil law, laying the foundation for modern Quebec. British rule reshaped Canada's identity, setting the stage for tensions between French and English communities and defining the nation's evolving political landscape. Chapter 7. The American Revolution and its impact on Canada. The American Revolution, 1775 to 1783, had profound effects on Canada, despite its population largely remaining loyal to Britain. When the 13 colonies declared independence, Canada became a refuge for thousands of loyalists who opposed the revolution. These newcomers reshaped the demographic and cultural makeup of British North America. The war also solidified Canada's status as a British stronghold in North America. Although the American rebels attempted to invade Canada, their efforts failed, ensuring that Canada would remain under British control. In the aftermath, the British government reorganized its Canadian territories, leading to the creation of Upper Canada, modern Ontario, and Lower Canada, modern Quebec, in 1791. This division reflected linguistic and cultural differences that would shape Canadian history for centuries. Chapter 8. The War of 1812, a defining moment. The War of 1812 was a pivotal conflict between Britain and the United States that had lasting consequences for Canada. As American forces attempted to conquer British North America, Canadian militias, British troops, and Indigenous allies united to defend the territory. Key battles, such as the Battle of Queenston Heights and the defense of Fort York, demonstrated Canadian resilience. Figures like Major General Isaac Brock and Shawnee leader Tecumseh emerged as heroes. Though the war ended in a stalemate with the Treaty of Ghent, 1814, it solidified Canada's borders and strengthened national identity. The conflict fostered a sense of unity among the diverse populations of British North America, reinforcing loyalty to the Crown. Chapter 9. Rebellions and Reform. The Path to Responsible Government. By the early 19th century, dissatisfaction with British rule and calls for greater democracy led to political unrest. The rebellions of 1837 to 1838 in Upper and Lower Canada were sparked by demands for responsible government and frustration with colonial elites. Though the uprisings were suppressed, they forced Britain to reconsider its governance policies. Lord Durham's report recommended uniting Upper and Lower Canada into a single province and granting more self-government. This led to the Act of Union in 1841 and the gradual establishment of responsible government in the 1840s. The reforms laid the groundwork for Canada's future as a self-governing entity within the British Empire, setting the stage for Confederation. Chapter 10. The Birth of a Nation, Confederation in 1867. On July 1, 1867, Canada officially became a self-governing dominion within the British Empire. The British North America Act united Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia into the Dominion of Canada, with Sir John A. Macdonald as its first Prime Minister. Confederation aimed to strengthen Canada's economy, enhance security, and reduce dependence on Britain. Over time, more provinces and territories joined, expanding Canada's reach across the continent. While Confederation marked a major step toward full independence, it also posed challenges, particularly for Indigenous peoples and French Canadians, whose interests were often sidelined. Chapter 11. Expanding westward, the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. Following Confederation, Canada sought to unify its vast territories. A key component of this vision was the construction of the Canadian Pacific Railway, CPR, completed in 1885. The railway connected eastern Canada to British Columbia, solidifying national unity and enabling economic growth. However, the project came at a great cost. The railway was built largely by immigrant labor, including thousands of Chinese workers who faced harsh conditions and discrimination. Indigenous lands were also heavily impacted, leading to further displacement and conflict. Despite these challenges, the CPR symbolized Canada's ambition and played a crucial role in expanding settlement across the prairies. Chapter 12. Indigenous Struggles, Treaties, and Resistance. As settlers expanded westward, Indigenous nations faced increasing pressure to sign treaties with the Canadian government. The numbered treaties, 1871 to 1921, were agreements that promised land, resources, and protection in exchange for Indigenous land rights. However, these treaties were often exploited by the government, leading to broken promises and hardship. Leaders such as Louis Riel led resistance movements, including the Red River Resistance, 1869-70, and the Northwest Rebellion, 1885, fighting for Indigenous and Métis rights. The defeat of these uprisings resulted in further suppression of Indigenous culture and autonomy. The legacy of these struggles continues today, shaping Canada's ongoing efforts toward reconciliation. Chapter 13. The Rise of Industry and Immigration. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw a surge in industrialization, particularly in Ontario and Quebec. Urban centers grew rapidly, fueled by manufacturing, mining, and natural resource industries. At the same time, Canada encouraged mass immigration, particularly from Europe, to settle the western provinces. While this expanded the economy, it also led to tensions with Indigenous communities and created social divides between established settlers and new arrivals. This period laid the foundation for Canada's diverse, modern society, but also introduced economic and social challenges that required government intervention. Chapter 14. Canada in World War I, a nation tested. When Britain entered World War I in 1914, Canada, as part of the British Empire, was automatically involved. Over 600,000 Canadians served, with key battles such as Vimy Ridge 1917, showcasing Canadian bravery and military effectiveness. The war had profound effects on the home front, including the introduction of income tax, rationing, and increased industrial output. It also intensified social divisions, particularly over conscription, which was fiercely opposed in Quebec. By the war's end in 1918, Canada emerged with a stronger sense of national identity and international recognition, though the cost in lives was devastating. Chapter 15. The Roaring Twenties and the Great Depression. The 1920s brought economic growth, technological advancements, and cultural change. Cities expanded, jazz flourished, and women gained greater rights, including the vote. However, the stock market crash of 1929 ushered in the Great Depression, plunging Canada into a decade of economic hardship. Unemployment soared, and many faced poverty. The government responded with relief programs, but the crisis exposed deep flaws in Canada's economic system. By the late 1930s, global tensions signaled another looming conflict, setting the stage for Canada's involvement in World War II. Chapter 16. Canada in World War II, a growing presence. When World War II broke out in 1939, Canada once again answered Britain's call to arms. Unlike in World War I, Canada made an independent decision to declare war on Germany, signifying its growing autonomy on the global stage. Over 1 million Canadians served in the war, fighting in major campaigns such as the Battle of the Atlantic, the invasion of Italy, and the Normandy landings on D-Day. At home, the war effort transformed the economy, leading to increased industrial production and job creation. Women played a crucial role, working in factories and serving in auxiliary military roles. By the war's end in 1945, Canada had cemented its reputation as a significant military and diplomatic force. Chapter 17. Post-war boom, social and economic change. The aftermath of World War II ushered in a period of rapid economic growth and social transformation. The post-war boom saw a rise in manufacturing, infrastructure projects, and the expansion of the middle class. The government introduced key social programs, including universal health care, unemployment insurance, and family allowances. Immigration surged as Canada welcomed refugees and skilled workers from Europe, diversifying its population. This era also saw the emergence of suburban life, advances in technology, and the rise of Canadian culture on the world stage. Chapter 18. The Quiet Revolution and the Rise of Quebec Nationalism. The 1960s marked a turning point for Quebec, with the Quiet Revolution bringing sweeping social and political changes. Quebec modernized its economy, reduced the influence of the Catholic Church, and demanded greater autonomy from the federal government. The rise of Quebec nationalism led to the formation of the Parti Québécois, which sought independence from Canada. The movement culminated in the 1980 and 1995 referendums on Quebec sovereignty, both of which failed, but highlighted the deep divisions within the country. The Quiet Revolution reshaped Canada's political landscape, influencing constitutional debates and national unity discussions for decades to come. Chapter 19. Indigenous Rights and Reconciliation. Throughout the 20th century, Indigenous communities faced systemic injustices, including forced assimilation policies, residential schools, and the erosion of treaty rights. By the late 20th century, Indigenous activism and legal battles brought these issues to national attention. Land claims, self-governance agreements, and the 2008 government apology for residential schools marked steps toward reconciliation. However, challenges remain, and Indigenous communities continue to fight for justice, equality, and cultural preservation. Reconciliation remains a crucial aspect of Canada's national identity and future. Chapter 20. The Canadian Identity, Multiculturalism and National Pride. Canada's identity evolved significantly in the latter half of the 20th century. In 1971, Canada became the first country to adopt an official policy of multiculturalism, recognizing its diverse immigrant population. This policy fostered inclusivity, though debates on integration and national identity persist. Canadian culture thrived through literature, film, and music, with figures like Margaret Atwood and Leonard Cohen gaining global recognition. The country also took pride in its social policies, strong international reputation, and peacekeeping efforts. By the late 20th century, Canada had firmly established itself as a progressive, multicultural nation on the world stage. Chapter 21. The Constitution Act of 1982 and Patriation. One of the most significant moments in Canada's modern history was the patriation of the Constitution in 1982. Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau led the effort to bring Canada's Constitution home from Britain, culminating in the Constitution Act of 1982. A key element of the Act was the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which enshrined fundamental rights and freedoms for all Canadians. However, the constitutional negotiations were contentious, with Quebec refusing to sign the agreement, a dispute that continues to impact Canadian politics today. The Constitution Act marked a turning point in Canada's sovereignty, solidifying its independence from Britain. Chapter 22. Economic Challenges and Political Shifts. The late 20th and early 21st centuries brought significant economic and political changes. Canada faced challenges such as recessions, trade negotiations, and shifting global markets. The implementation of the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, in 1994 strengthened Canada's economic ties with the United States and Mexico. Political landscapes also evolved, with the rise of new parties, shifting alliances, and increasing debates over government policies. Issues such as healthcare, taxation, and environmental protection became major political topics. Despite challenges, Canada remained a stable democracy with a resilient economy, adapting to the changing global landscape. Chapter 23. Canada on the world stage, peacekeeping and global influence. Canada established itself as a leader in peacekeeping and diplomacy. Throughout the late 20th century and into the 21st century, Canadian forces participated in numerous international peacekeeping missions under the United Nations. The country also played a crucial role in humanitarian aid, disaster relief, and global health initiatives. Figures like Lester B. Pearson, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts in resolving the Suez Crisis, solidified Canada's reputation as a peacekeeping nation. Canada's foreign policy continued to emphasize multilateralism, human rights, and global cooperation. Chapter 24. The 21st Century, Challenges and Progress. Entering the 21st century, Canada faced new challenges, including climate change, technological advancements, and evolving global conflicts. The country strengthened its commitment to environmental policies, Indigenous reconciliation, and digital innovation. Social movements gained momentum, advocating for gender equality, racial justice, and climate action. Canada also navigated crises such as economic downturns and the COVID-19 pandemic, showcasing resilience and adaptability. Despite uncertainties, Canada remained a global leader in innovation, inclusivity, and sustainability. Chapter 25. Canada today and the future ahead. As of today, Canada continues to evolve as a diverse, democratic, and prosperous nation. The country faces pressing challenges, including economic shifts, environmental sustainability, and maintaining national unity. Looking ahead, Canada is poised to lead in technology, green energy, and social progress. The strength of its institutions, cultural diversity, and commitment to global cooperation position it well for the future. Canada's journey through time reflects resilience, growth, and an enduring spirit of inclusivity and progress, shaping its future on the world stage.